Hey, welcome to the Damned If You Do podcast, where two cousins share our experiences growing up as children of immigrants
and how we navigate the world today as teachers, mothers, and women of color who have something to say. Hey y'all, thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Linda.
And my name is Praise. We are first cousins and second-gen Korean Americans.
We have been wanting to sit down and start this podcast forever, y'all. But, life gets in the way. Apparently multiple babies, and careers and families slow you down just a little.
Just a little. But we're now really excited to kick off our podcast. The thing is, this was not supposed to be our first episode. We had lots of plans for our first episode, introducing ourselves, talking about our families, just kicking it and having fun. But, again, life doesn't roll that way sometimes. So our first episode is going to be about CFC. Now, Mia, our producer, she told me that after listening to the podcast episode that we recorded, she had no idea what we were talking about for about 10 minutes or 15 minutes. So here is an introduction to the episode that you are about to hear. CFC is a Korean megachurch in Champaign, Illinois at the University of Illinois. Champaign-Urbana, I guess, at the University of Illinois. It's led by Pastor Min Chung, or it used to be before he is no longer the leader there, just recently, I guess. But it's unique in the sense where it's mostly Koreans. I mean, it is mostly Korean Americans. There's some Asian Americans and there's some non-Asian Americans, but it is mostly Korean. I would say at any given time it's about 1,000 members, but the reach is so much wider than that because people graduate from CFC, and I say graduate from CFC, not even U of I, and they leave and become Christian leaders all over the state of Illinois and Chicago, all over the country, in fact, and frankly all over the world because they go to be missionaries or church leaders elsewhere. And so the reach of CFC is pretty wide. Now, it's been around, the church itself has been around for decades, but recently an Instagram page started blowing up called Letters from Rahab. And this Instagram page had a call out for people to send in their stories of problems they had at CFC, and what emerged were many, many accounts of abuse. That is your trigger warning for if you want to go check that Instagram page out, Letters from Rehab. There are many heinous stories that are there. And the reason why this page started, it all started with Pastor Min's own scandal, which we will talk about in this episode. So basically, as the Instagram page is blowing up, WBEZ got wind of it for a certain reason, and they started this intense investigative report, and they published it within this last month. And the report gives you all the facts. Now, this episode will offer you the personal perspectives of a brother and sister, myself and my brother Amos, who both attended. And this is our call to accountability.
Today I have the privilege of sitting down with Praise and Amos Lee, my dynamic duo cousins. And they are here to talk about everything that has come to light with CFC in recent months, really to give their personal take on what they experience and how they perceive what's been happening. So, what does CFC stand for?
CFC stands for Covenant Fellowship Church, and it's a church in Champaign, Illinois.
Okay. So, folks may know something about this or may have tuned into the article and the 3-day segment from WBEZ, but it would be really helpful if you could give us just some brief context about what it is, what's been happening, and briefly describe, your experience with it years ago.
So recently that WBEZ article came out. It was very long, and it really exposes all of the inner workings of CFC, which is a campus church that both Amos and I attended. I attended it first, since I'm older. And when he joined me on campus, he also attended. I started attending at the end of my freshman year, which means 1999, and I stayed until 2004, 2 years after I graduated. And I even worked around the campus so that I could stay at the church and learn more and serve as they encourage you to do.
I arrived on campus in 2001 as a freshman, and I stayed, it gets murky, but I believe it was 2018. So about 17 to 18 years I was there. Was an undergrad member, was a servant for many years, which is what they call leaders who lead Bible studies. And led missions teams to Kenya, Africa as well for teachers, and so was pretty involved. And as a Korean male, was privy to enough of the culture and everyday practices there that I know a lot about CFC.
So I didn't know that it was about 18 years.
Correct.
Wow.
So he spent 18 years growing up and then 18 years at CFC.
Correct.
Oh my gosh, I feel responsible a little.
You should. Absolutely, you should.
I was also a leader for a couple of years. Like what they call a co-servant, because, a leader is a servant, and then leading small groups of my own.
So clearly you were very involved in different ways. What kept you there for so long?
I think for me, I stayed there for a couple of years after, and I probably, to be honest, would have stayed there longer had my mom not suddenly fallen ill. So it was, I think when it comes down to it, the reason I was drawn into it was because of the culture of the church and also this sort of blissful experience of salvation that I experienced. I was really depressed my freshman year, and I didn't want to go to CFC because they were always blocking up all the entrances at FAR and making lots of noise, and I just didn't want to go. But when you're kind of at the bottom, rock bottom, you feel like I need something. And sometimes that answer seems to be God, especially if you grew up in like a Korean American sort of church culture family. So I tried it out, and that was at the end of 1999. And then I stayed because I genuinely felt like if I left CFC, I wouldn't be a Christian anymore.
What about you, Amos?
For me, it was, we attended a very small youth group in Chicagoland, and then we moved in my junior year to a little bit of a bigger church in the suburbs. And there, a lot of the people that left there and went to U of I went to CFC. So the assumption even before going was that if you went to U of I, you would attend CFC. So the moment I arrived on campus, all the CFC members from that home church attended CFC, and from day one, you were just involved in everything that was CFC. And then so you met other people who attended CFC. You met a lot of people from different churches. So I went to Carmel Presbyterian, but then you'd meet people from Antioch Church, you'd meet people from Hebron Church, you'd meet people, right, from all these different Korean churches in the Chicagoland area.
From KCCC. I'm
Yes.
saying that because that's where Linda somewhat went.
Yeah. So and so it's a community already that you're familiar with, and so you join. There's also no other church, Korean American church on campus except for CFC. All of the other Korean churches are Korean speaking, so they were the dominant scene. So either you did that, or you went to a white church, and that wasn't an option. So.
Or no church.
Or no church, which didn't seem like an option as well.
So, can you talk a little bit more about what really kept you there?
I stayed because, they create a system where everyone is vying to gain acceptance in the church, and everybody wants to be a leader because that is the acknowledgement of your spirituality. And also, it's so highly selective. Right? And
okay.
so you have to start vying for those positions your freshman year. Because by your junior year, you have to be selected by your leader to be a helper, like a helper in your small group.
That's
And
right.
then your senior year, you can become a co-servant if they select you. And then, and it's like a private club, right? If you're in the co-servant or the serving body, you're in a particular group of people that meet every Sunday morning. They have their own systems. They have their own, meetings. They're very highly selective, respected by other church members. And, I think that is kind of what kept me there as well, just wanting to be in that leadership position.
Well, you can't apply for leadership.
Correct. You have to be
You
chosen.
can't be voted in, right?
Yeah.
Somebody chooses you. And then once you're sort of on that leadership path, there's there's a culture to stay. They say stay and grow. I remember I gave up a study abroad opportunity. I wanted to go to London as an English major and go, see all the Shakespeare plays and take my Shakespeare classes there, and because I hate reading Shakespeare. But
Well said by an English teacher.
Yeah.
and I stayed to grow and I don't blame the person who encouraged me to do that, but it was the culture.
They had something to offer. They had something to give,
Uh-huh.
and we wanted it. Spirituality, God, in one sense, community, respect, power, authority, friendships, connectedness. All of that was a part of what they wanted, and you were special, right? If you got chosen, because not everyone got chosen. So if you were chosen, you were, chosen for a reason. Now it sounds ridiculous, but it made sense back then.
But what I'm hearing is that, you and I'm sure many other people felt very seen and heard, and a very strong sense of belongingness, but also being acknowledged for your spirituality,
Yeah.
right? So the more chosen you are, the more leadership you ascend to, the better Christian you are. Is that how you felt?
I don't know if I was a better Christian, but I wanted to be a part of the organization. It called to me, right? To be a part of that body and to be a part of that group. People join fraternities, people join sororities, people join, clubs. And for me, that was church. And so I wanted to be a part of that church in terms of leadership. But what it does is it makes everyone compete against one another, unknowingly, right? I mean, we choose to, how many morning prayers can you go to? Are you a morning prayer leader?
How many morning prayers can you sleep through?
How many morning prayers can you sleep through? How do you, get along with other members? Do you do other activities for the church? I was a part of drink ministry. Why?
What's drink?
Drink ministry.
You make drinks?
Yes. You make lemonade. You make lemonade on Sunday mornings.
Oh my gosh.
And I was a part of drink ministry.
I never stooped so low.
It was all right. It was all right.
What a Sunday cocktail.
A Sunday cocktail.
Okay, mixologist.
I'm sorry, that was a mistake. It was Kool-Aid. People would correct me.
Okay.
It was not lemonade.
Don't
it was
write
Kool-Aid.
emails. This is our first podcast.
All right. And so let's move on to everything that's happened within this year and essentially what's become an expose on the church and a lot of the voices that have come forward really exposing a lot of the assault, sexual assault, harm, which has transpired in many different ways. Let's talk about that. So what was your role individually? What was your role in contributing to these things coming to light? And what was your purpose in contributing to it?
So when I first saw the letters of rehab, I keep calling it letters of rehab, even though it's rehab. When I first saw it, to be honest, I was slightly annoyed because it was before some of the more heinous stories started coming to light. Because as people were putting stories out there, I was like, oh, now we care. Now we care. What about all those years I was writing on social media and my own blog and people calling me a gossip and, word coming back to me that, they read something I wrote and other people are calling me names, but they wouldn't call me names, but it's all done in private. And I felt like I was the only one kind of being public about it. and getting some shit about it, even if it's secondhand shit, because nobody ever says it to my face.
What were the kind of comments you received in that backlash against you?
Well, nobody ever. That's the thing about people who accuse you of being a gossip. They don't have the guts to say it to your face. So it's always somebody who's actually coming to tell you that they agree with you, but they would never publicly agree with you. And then they always couch it in terms of, oh, these other people think you're totally gossiping and that you've fallen away being Christianese for not Christian anymore. But I don't think so. I think you're telling the truth. I'm like, okay, well, thank you. Could you say that publicly?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not. And so I felt really a little salty that, suddenly everyone cares. But then, soon I put myself quickly on the back burner because if you go to the Insta page, Letters of Rahab, it's insane. I mean, the accounts coming up were they were barf-worthy because of how horrifying they were. I mean, it's like trigger warning after trigger warning after trigger warning that I would have to give to people before sending them to that Insta page. So Amos is the one who sent it to me. And so he and I were texting back and forth or calling on the phone. And, I'm always digging for more info. And I was like, Amos, I know you know these people. Did you start it? He's like, no, it's not me. No.
It's not.
And it's not.
It's not.
To clear that up for our 3 listeners, I just want to say it is not him. He did not start that. But as we were talking about the Insta page, we both kept saying, this needs to be public. This needs to get out there. Like, do we know anyone? Do we know anybody? It's like, no, we're both teachers. We know only teachers. So me being the, quote unquote heretic that I am, I started just pitching it online I reached out to a few friends who are kind of related to journalism in some way, but then I just started pitching. I pitched it to Serial. Still waiting on them. Serial, if you're listening, this is a good one. But I pitched it to WBZ because, when I drive home during rush hour, I'm always listening to Esther Yoonji Kang and Susie An. And they're Korean. They're Korean American. So I pitched it to Esther because she does the, the race, class, and community or whatever that segment is. Sorry, Esther. Should have looked that up. And anyway, so I pitched it to her, and she got back to me that night. And the next day, we had an hour interview. And in the interview, as I talked about some of the, spiritual, emotional trauma that I felt from CFC, I cried talking to her. I haven't cried about CFC in years and years and years and years, but 20 years, after I attended U of I cried. That's trauma-induced tears, right? That's triggers. After reading the Rahab site, though, I feel like I got away unscathed because of all the stuff that's on there. But that was my only role to get the ball rolling. And then I gave her Amos because I guess he's been there 18 years or something. So I told her that he would be the one that could give her more people to talk to.
For me, at that point, I had left CFC. So in 2018, my wife Alice and I decided to leave because we just couldn't take it anymore. We had a fateful encounter where Min Chung compared Donald Trump to Hitler and talked about how Donald Trump was not as bad as Hitler. And that resulted in us being very upset, in the service. And he watches people in the service. So he knew we were upset. He reached out to Alice, and she, thought it was a good idea to meet.
Didn't you walk out?
Yes, I walked out of service. I can't handle that. Yeah, and Alice was vehemently disagreeing, which you never do, right? Because you don't disagree with Min Chung, right? Mm-hmm. And so he saw that immediately and contacted her, and she, got us to meet. And in that meeting, he revealed really what he believed, because he doesn't really tell people exactly what he believes. He's very magnacious on the pulpit. Mm-hmm. But in that, did I say that word incorrectly?
That's Amos's made-up
word
that he always uses.
Oh, Lord.
He's very, charismatic.
Charismatic.
Or mysterious.
Yes. Alan, okay. My wife will listen to this and correct me on my Ricky Ricardo language.
has a list of vocabulary he
just
uses with
make
great
up.
confidence,
I
and,
just
and
make up.
I always have to look those
Yeah.
words up as if I didn't know them.
Yeah. So long story short, that incident led to others. He, when I realized that this man was crazy, then we just could not stay anymore. And Alice was already making relationships with a person from another church, and we kind of moved on. In that meeting, he verbatim told me that he is the sole arbiter of faith here in this place, and that by sitting next to you, he can sense your spirituality. And people might deny this now, but I don't care. Talk to 100 CMC people there at the church now
Yep.
who are my age or older, and they will verify this. You can't say I misinterpreted this, right? He is the sole interpreter of your faith. He can tell what spiritual condition you are at by sitting next to you, no words. And just by sitting next to you, his spiritual power is so great that he can help convert you and bring you to Christ. That is true power. And that's what he's trying to instill in all his members if we would just follow him.
According to him.
According to him. After that, there was nothing else that needed to be said. I'm out. You're nuts. This is a cult. Okay? And so we left, right? And so I approached this from an outsider. At that point, I was not at CFC. I was not an insider. I was not a member, even though they didn't have membership at that point. And I talked to Esther about my experiences there. I talked to Esther about what I knew. I was talking to a bunch of people who were a part of the original allegations group, which is a host of families who were at CFC, who tried to confront the associate pastors about the behavior and about what they wanted done.
You were part of that?
I was not, because I already
Sorry.
left. It was just the families inside, and they received hell for it. I mean, let's just be honest. They received hell for it. And so, I was from the outside. My role was I talked to Esther, and I pushed her toward people that I knew from the allegations group to try to get them to talk. A lot of people were really reluctant to go on record. But now I see all their names, plastered everywhere. So apparently something changed in the meantime. But I remember I was like begging people to just talk and, go on record and do things like that. And so that was my portion of it. My other portion is that I was a common commenter on Letters of Rahab. I honestly didn't want to get involved in that because social media comments get crazy and it takes over your life and you got to keep on top of them. But my wife Alice was making comments about patriarchy, and then people were attacking her, and then I was like, I've had enough of that too.
You can't attack. Yeah.
I just had enough of that, right? Especially these men, these Korean men, and so that's when I went on the assault on Letters of Instagram as well. Just calling out commenters, and then also calling out the church.
There was
Right?
one heinous comment toward Alice about the way wives should behave.
It was about marital rape, and the comment was: so if a wife, does not want, is not in the mood, you're saying that is marital rape. That diminishes all the other people who actually endure marital rape. And honestly, we were just like, shut the up. This is not the time or space. We learned from PAC forums, which is Progressive Asian American Christian, forums, that when people like that come on, even though they might be well-meaning or whatever, you cannot allow that to stand because it just invites all the other really,
Nasty comments.
Really, males with really fragile egos. They all come out of the woodwork to make a comment.
To rally.
Absolutely. Later on, Eric Sohn was making these crazy
Whoa, name drop, let's go.
comments.
He deleted them.
I don't know if he deleted it or Letters of Rahab deleted it, but I was like, yeah, that's it. That's craziness right there. So that was my part as well. And then just also giving advice to, some people in the allegations group and, other people about kind of what it's going to take to actually get something out of all of this and not just be, a one-time event.
Mm-hmm. So that's really helpful to understand how a lot of this came together, right? And there are a lot of other voices and a lot of other folks who contributed to this, but I wanted to hear from you. And can you also just really clarify, what is your specific purpose in what you did? What is your hope for this?
What is my hope? Do you have a quick answer? You go first.
Yeah, so mine is very clear. Current CFC members will say that this was, a coordinated attack to take down Min Chung.
What's wrong with
And
that?
I would argue that it was not really coordinated because everyone is busy with lives and children and work, and we have better things to do. But there had to be accountability. And accountability could not be him increasing a fast day, telling nobody, and believing that he did penance before God enough that nobody can hold him accountable. Like, he's done it, right? And that cannot be, right? There has to be some justice, a tiny bit of justice for everyone who's been wronged there. And that means that the person at the top has got to go. Because CFC is Min Chung. They are one in the same. Without him being removed, then it's basically like nothing happened. Everything has been swept under the rug. So my goal was that they remove him as lead pastor. And I'm not the only one who called for that. Many people called for that. It's just that KJ and Dave, Kang, and, especially those two were not listening to that. Including the leadership oversight board, which was a straw. I asked somebody recently, I was in Champaign, when that oversight board got put in place, what did you think? And the first response out of this member, who's been there longer than I, probably 20 years
Still there?
plus, no, not anymore, laughed. And he said, we all knew what that meant. You put straw men in those places who would support Min Chung. And everybody knew it who knew those guys. Everybody knew it. Now they put up these leadership updates like, we're going to make changes. It's going to be better. We acknowledge. Anyone who knows CFC knows that they're gaslighting, right? They're gaslighting. And so my goal was remove Min Chung as the leadership, and my goal now is, close the church down.
I just agree. The end. Personally, I just didn't have enough information. All I knew what was coming in from letters of rehab and whatever I can get out of Amos. So I think I just had to be true to myself. And that's how I am always. I have to be true to myself with what I know at the time, right? Because I don't always know everything. But at this time, I have to be true to myself. And being true to myself means speaking truth to power. It's got to be done. And if that means there in CFC, there's not really much opportunity to speak truth to power. You speak truth to power, and he tells you he's the sole arbiter of faith. I mean, the end, right? So you have to speak it elsewhere, where you will be heard. And so I personally am glad I'm not embroiled in the middle of it. I'm too far removed. But at the same time, if I were, I would stand by it. Just like I stand by Amos and all the decisions he made, because I'm really proud of him and Alice and all the other people who did this work.
There are moments in life where you, like, some battles are beyond you, right? Like, you can get involved, but it's very difficult. And then some battles are, like, right in front of you.
Yeah.
And you can choose to get involved or not.
Yeah.
And so it was a moral decision as well. When I was talking to Alice about it, I mean, she was clear from the get-go. She's like, she was involved, right, from the get-go. She was in there. For me, I was hesitant because I'm Korean. And I'm like, oh, maybe I don't want to say, we left, so can I just, let it go and move on? But, it's a decision that you have to live with for the rest of your life. And for me, when it came down to that in discussion with with Alice, I could not step down from the battle, right? In terms of making sure that other people didn't come here and experience the same abuse, right? Because if that church continued on the way it is, how many more people will they have absolutely tormented and tortured, right? Believing that. Because, Min Chung believes that if he got away with this, he believed that it was because God ordained it that way, because he's a faithful servant. He will not change, but ramp up even more the way that he runs that church, right? Nothing would have changed. And so just knowing that about him, for me, there was very few choices otherwise.
Mm-hmm. So, where does leadership lie now? What has happened? And what do you hope, what do you feel like should happen still that hasn't yet, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, KJ Kim, and I haven't talked to him, but he is blaming it on Min Chung, right? So I knew early on that they would never remove Min Chung unless there was so much public pressure that they actually felt like their ministries and their lives were in jeopardy, right? Their reputations. And that's what happened. Forever. Allegations Group came forward. They put a charge with the presbytery against Min Chung. None of that went through. You know, that leadership team defended Min Chung forever. And for now, for them to say that they did not know these things and that now they're going to make a change and they've separated is complete falsehood. They knew from the beginning they were put there for a reason, right? And so I don't know what KJ Kim is thinking. I think a lot of people don't know what he is thinking. I thought he was more...
Is he thinking at all? Really the question.
I thought he was more reasonable than that. I think perhaps there's this desire to save this church, but I'm going to be honest, it's not worth saving. I get it. You got 200 members left who want to congregate. You don't have to congregate as CFC.
Mm-hmm.
You can congregate as another church. No one's telling you to not go to church, right? But CFC in itself cannot stand. Right? So whether you join another presbytery, whether you take membership and vote in elders, anyone related to this scandal and abuse cannot remain there. And I don't know if they understand that. I would also like my tithing back. They have over $1 million in, I say this in jest, but not really. They have over $1 million in savings. And even if you're not going to give it to me, that's fine. Make a reparations fund for victims.
Ooh.
Put all that money. Don't you dare take that money and start a new church.
Oh,
take that
you heard
money
it here. You
and
heard
start
it
a
here.
reparations fund. Associate pastors who have been former pastors of CFC, you better take a public stand on this.
Right.
You are quiet.
They are so quiet.
Silent. And your complicity, as well as ours, everyone is complicit to a varying degree. Mm-hmm. And if you're not going to speak out on it, this is not cancel culture. People keep saying, this is cancel culture. This is secularism.
Bruh.
The man sexually assaulted. They say inappropriately touched. But when you touch a female or anybody and you don't have the permission, that is assault. So sexually assaulted a church member, female, without their consent.
Or their consciousness.
And we're still having a debate about why are we trying to take it public? This is gossip.
Right.
This is craziness.
And not even just that one incident, supposedly, but also just the silence culture that he created that so many people complied with, whether, however much awareness folks may have had, right? But even just the culture you described as a church member and everything that he led, but what it took to keep that going and to perpetuate it.
It's complex, women were abused, women were assaulted, women were, groomed, and yet there are also, as my wife reminds me, there are women there who have defended that system, right? Miss Kim, the second, leader of the church under Min Chung, who has passed recently, she
was the gatekeeper of patriarchy.
She was the gatekeeper, and she reinforced those ideas. And so, at CFC, I think people are trying to do a neat and clean narrative of what has happened, but it's not neat and it's not clean. And there are multiple layers there that need to be addressed in many ways with people who have been complicit and still are.
So, you touch on this. Do you have any thoughts, or what would you say to folks who feel like you have unfairly criticized the church, who may not share the same experiences in the same way that a lot of folks who were harmed in the church did.
Shall we offer a big fuck you? Inappropriate or on par? Could you not think of yourself for 1 second? That's what I would say. Could you not think of yourself for a second? Did you not read Letters of Rahab, a.k.a. Rehab, with the rest of us? I mean, I cannot imagine. I had great experiences there as well. Although I have terrible experiences there, partly due to a crazy purity culture that Miss Diddler-in-Chief pushed throughout my entire time at CFC. I mean, it was the purity culture. I have all sorts of problems that arose from this is my time at CFC. But I had great times too. I met some of my closest friends there. I learned how to play guitar, although nobody asked me to play in small group because only men were allowed to play guitar in small group. That is crazy, except for Chris Cho. Shout out Chris Cho. Other than that, I had great times there too. I had lots of laughter. Oh my God, how many times did we play Mafia? You know what I mean? Or how many? We went to like pumpkin patches. We had mini Olympics. It was fun. I had great times there. I'm not going to be like, I'm sorry, you were groomed from a youth group kid from a CFC leader. Sorry, my experiences trump your experiences. Nope, not going to happen. So you can fuck off, or you can, if you really are a Christian, you can repent for even thinking that.
Yeah, CFC doesn't exist in a power vacuum. And there are people who experience a lot of privilege at CFC who do not understand the experiences of those who did not. And honestly, let's just be honest, most likely the most vulnerable at CFC were the ones who probably experienced the most abuse, right? Because honestly, I did not know of any of these abuse stories. Like, you hear them occasionally, but I never knew a person who actually experienced that, right? And so the experiences of CFC are different. What shocks me, though, is that for a church that talks about, God's justice, for a church that talks about accountability, for a church that prides itself on repentance, this is the theme of the church. It shocks me that they refuse to be repentant about this in ways that actually create some kind of justice for, survivors of all of these things that happen, right? And so, my thing for them is that it's hypocrisy. It's absolute hypocrisy. If you truly cared about them, you would take a hard look at yourself. You're not going to be able to make a new. You're just going to make a CFC version 2.0. Let's just be real about this, right? And so the best way to do it is to close and try to redo it your own way in different, smaller ways. I don't know. But that institution can no longer stand. And I think a lot of them are doing it selfishly. I'll just be honest, and this is going to get, people are going to be angry. It's their only community. If you lose CFC, what do you have? You have nothing. There's a palpable fear of that. It's all they've known for the last 20, 30 years, especially older people. Like, what will they do, right? And so I do believe that there is a fear of that as well.
I think it's fear, and on top of fear, and I say this to the leaders of the church now, and people who want to stay at the church now, I think it's a grave fear of shame. And I say that thinking about how shame plays an integral part in our culture and is a stereotype of our culture, but I don't mean that kind of shame. I don't mean the kind of shame where you lose face in a society or in front of other people. I'm talking about the kind of shame that comes when you realize, I've been bad, I've done bad, and I've hurt other people, either directly or indirectly, either by participating in the church culture or not. I experienced the shame myself just a long time ago when I first came out of the church. And I started reaching out to people I was rebuking, they would encourage you to rebuke people. I just put scare quotes up because, you're supposed to tell people what they're doing wrong in their Christian walk, and that's supposedly helping them. What did I know? what did I fucking know? I didn't know jack. And I'm telling people, oh, you better do this or that. I'm like, I actually like have certain memories where I reached out to like certain co-leaders, Mike, if you're out there, and other people, even from Carmel, whatever. And they don't respond because they don't want me to say anything weird to them, I'm sure. But it's that fear of shame. I really think that's there. It's the Adam and Eve. I suddenly realize that I'm naked and I want to cover myself. And they don't want to realize that they've been naked, right? Mm. And then the guilt. Once the shame hits, then the guilt hits. The hundreds and hundreds, thousands of people that have walked through this church. Whom have I affected, right? And then the shame and the guilt. You don't want to face that. So let's just double down. Let's play the Min Chung game and double down. And I think that's really scary for some people, but you're right. It is hypocrisy if you can't face yourself.
And let's just add two more words, which is arrogance, and they're delusional. They if KJ believes that he is destined to save this church, he has ruined it by his inaction of Min Chung. He could have made the choice. He had the power to make the choice, and he did not. And to now believe that, he's doing something noble, trying to save CFC. If he really wants to save it, he's got to go. These leadership, the remaining ones who are unafraid of apparently lawsuits and they've stayed, believing that they can somehow make anew when they have been complicit to this since the beginning, like that is either you are really arrogant or you are delusional. Mm. You have no credibility or basis to judge anything. You have to go. And the fact that you won't go, it's that same motif. I've been put here for a reason. I have been chosen. I will help us to get through this scandal. You are part of... See, Min Chung couldn't do this alone. He did it. He started it. But there were hundreds, if not thousands of followers who did his bidding, who agreed with him. Mm-hmm. And they're still here at this church. Not all of them. Mm-hmm. But there are enough there that they're going to make nothing anew. Nothing.
This has been very helpful. You walking us through all this. Are there any final thoughts you want to add before we wrap up?
I have one. Please send all your hate email to lindakim@aol.com.
I didn't even go to CFC, y'all, so go right ahead.
I said AOL.com. Poor Linda Kim at AOL.com, some 80-year-old Korean lady who still uses dial-up.
You mean like my dad?
I don't know. I don't know if I have any... You have some. I can see it.
I think if you were a part of CFC in any major way, we have to do some deconstructing of what has been done there. Because supporting Min Chung or not going against him when, all of these stories came out is one thing, but, there are so many different things that happened at CFC in different ways that have just messed people up, Mm-hmm. And so I hope that it's a collective time where we rethink these things as we join other churches or as we do other things to, not just think, it was an era of Min Chung, but it really is a culture of that church in many different ways. And that's what I'm doing, right? I'm thinking about the ways in which I have interacted with people, mm-hmm. been complicit, Right. And if you think that you're not complicit, that's crazy. That's delusionment, right? That you're delusional. Everyone has to own and account for that in some way or another. But I think we could do it collectively. I don't think we have to do it alone.
If I really believe if I've ever been complicit in harming somebody's well-being, you can reach out to me. I dole out apologies. I am very good at doing it because you deserve it, and it frees me too. Mm. So, don't tell my husband. He says I never apologize to him. But to you all, I will. Love you.
Yes, that resonated with me very hard.
since this is my first and last probably podcast about CFC,
Nuh-uh, I'm gonna make him buy a mic.
because I got a life, okay? I got
Talk
things.
about the Korean culture aspect of it.
I got things to do, okay?
He got nothing to do.
So let me do my last call out, okay? Presbytery, governing organizations that supposedly keep pastors accountable. Good Lord. And for other pastors who believe this is wrong, but believe that the presbytery will somehow bring God's justice, y'all need to get a clue, okay? Pastors cannot hold one another accountable. They see themselves in that sin. And so I don't know what you're going to do, but that is not the way you're going to hold all of these pastors accountable. Local presbytery and national, you're losing people. You know, you're not doing what you got to do. In any regard. And that is clearly detailed in the WBEZ article, and the allegations group can tell you about their over 100-page allegations document that still, someone wrote that still did not get justice for what needed to be. He's still an ordained minister.
Pastor Mint?
Yes.
We're going to let that silence hang.
And that was from the KCP, Korean Central Presbytery. Thank you.
Get your shit together, Presbytery.
They can't. Just disband.
I don't even know
Just
what that
disband.
means.
Just
All I know
disband.
is we grew up in a Presbyterian church, but I guess it's a governing organization.
Correct.
Of the Presbyterian churches.
Correct.
Subsect Korean Presbyterian Church?
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Thank you so much for sitting down with me today and sharing really openly and honestly about your experiences then when you actually attended CFC and today in light of all the things that have come forth, a lot of which you helped with actually exposing. And it brings up a lot of things for me as someone who didn't attend CFC, but as someone who is a woman of faith, who's a human being, who participates in this very capitalistic, patriarchal society. And I think when a lot of people hear stories like this, anything that has some narrative of an institution being cult-ish or involving, young people or vulnerable populations, especially with faith in the picture, I think a lot of people tend to ask, how did this happen? What allowed it to happen for so long? And while those are fair questions, they never really get answered in a lot of ways because a lot of people really are quick to either sweep it under the rug or distance themselves immediately and run for safety and disassociate. And while people try to hold leadership accountable, years in the making, it doesn't often end up, really seeking the social justice that it deserves for those involved, especially those harmed. And, Amos spoke to this earlier. He and I had a conversation when he talked about, a lot of people stay nameless or in the shadows. And even in interviews, a lot of names are often left out. And this is not a nameless thing, right? And it is clear, it could become clear why things are perpetrated and perpetuated as long as they are, because there are folks who definitely should be held accountable, and there are very specific decisions that are made to allow these things to occur. And I'm thinking about, not just CFC or churches or mega churches. I'm thinking about so many different institutions that have allowed atrocities to happen and have really developed a whole culture of silence around it. Everything from the Boys and Girls Clubs of America, where a lot of people came forward, speaking to the sexual abuse that they had to endure, to, our local Young Chicago Authors, which is an organization that I used to admire. And, I coached slam poetry at my high school, so did praise. And, at this point, I got to say that I'm not surprised anymore. I feel jaded by this. But I think that's a helpful reminder to me about how there are levels of accountability that should happen, that can happen. And Amos, you spoke to it really well when you mentioned the battles, right? You can't jump on every team. You can't fight all the battles, but there's definitely some battles that come before each and every one of us in our lives, right? So what is that battle, and what will your decision be?
Huge shout out to Amos, our very first guest, to Mia, our producer extraordinaire,
And to Clark, who gave us this awesome music for the best price of all, free $99. Thanks for listening.